Welcome, everyone. Please be aware that we're recording this session as Zoom has just let you know. And we have also enabled the live transcript for closed captioning, and you may find that option on the control bar that usually appears at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I would like to extend the warmest welcome to you for this ASLI Contingent and Independent Scholar online speaker event. Today's topic is strategies for solidarity. I'm Kay Huber. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Culture Studies at Tilburg University. And before this job, I worked as an independent scholar while teaching language arts in a rural public high school in Oregon. From January 2023 to December 2025, I have the honor of serving in the ASLI Executive Council as the Contingent Independent Advocacy Officer. For those of you who are joining ASLI or the ASLI event tonight for the first time, a special welcome. We are so glad to have you joining us today, and we would like to invite you to help sustain and further our work by becoming an ASLI member if you're not already part of our association. ASLI acknowledges its office is located within Endokina, the ancestral and unceded homeland of the Abenaki people along the Quanatech and Ashwilat watersheds and in the shadow of Mount Monadnock. We recognize that this land has been cared for by the Abenaki for at least 12,600 years, including by the Sokoke, Pennacook, and other Wabanaki peoples. ASLI offers this statement as a way of affirming its commitment to recognizing and supporting Native history and culture in the Monadnock region and all regions where our members and officers dwell, past, present, and future. ASLI's leadership is hosting this event tonight, or I keep saying tonight, I'm in the Netherlands, this event today to take stock of the current landscape for independent and contingent scholars. As much has changed since our speaker series event last year, which you can find on the ASLI website. We aim today to consider how to support each other and to build solidarity and to build networks. We have 5 amazing speakers to discuss how current challenges impact independent and contingent scholars as contingency expands across higher education. We hope this event will offer new insights and inspiration for where we can take our research, teaching, and activism in the future, asking many of the independent and contingent scholars in the ASLI community to lead the way. So by way of logistical information, we'll ask that you remain on mute, and we'll have time for questions after a brief discussion. So each speaker will introduce sort of their ideas and approaches, because I'll introduce each person and then invite them to share how their approaches to teaching, funding, activism, and coalition building, as well as research, have had to change over the past year with the shifting political, educational, and environmental conditions that we're all facing. I would like to first introduce Adriana Kolijn, who is a PhD candidate, at least until Monday, where she will defend her dissertation at the University of Ottawa in Canada. Adriana recently submitted her thesis entitled Seeds of a Revolution, Land Reform and Literary Ecologies in Modern Latin American Literature, and she has also published the article Bananas, Deep Ecology and Neocolonialism in Viento Fuerte by Miguel Angel Asturias in the journal Hispania. Previously, she was a member at large in the ASLI Executive Council, and she is also active in the Canadian Association of Hispanists and organizing a panel for its upcoming conference in Salamanca, Spain in 2026. She is currently teaching Spanish at the University of Ottawa. So looking forward to hearing more from you, Adriana.
Thank you so much, Kate. And just to repeat again, thanks so much for organizing this panel. So I guess I'm coming to you from the Canadian perspective and context, but of course there's many overlaps. And even though I'll mainly be speaking about what I've been doing for the Canadian Association of Hispanists, there's much there that I think you might find useful. So I became more active. I've actually begun to call it activism. When I learned that my program of Hispanic Studies at the University of Ottawa would be closed. The graduate and doctoral streams are now paused, but that's a polite way to say closed. This got me to thinking a lot about the situation of my studies in Canada, and it led me to organizing a panel called The Future of Hispanic Studies in Canada for this same association in their annual conference in Montreal in 2024. I gathered panelists from across all of Canada to come and speak at this event, and it was an eye opener for many people because there was a lot of bubbles. There are so many bubbles going on where I think a lot of people saw the problems in their institutions, but did not realize that it was actually a national problem. So this panel had a big impact. And then after that, in the next annual conference, which was in Calgary this May, there was a continuation of this conversation started in my panel. It became the plenary, which was done not in the traditional way where you had one speaker come, but we actually had a series of people come and discuss different elements of the issue, all professors, including also the right hand. I forgot his name. He's the right hand man of the ambassador from Spain. He also came in to put his political input. And this coincided with the fact that two professors had come together and crunched some numbers and put together data on the state of Spanish studies and Spanish language in Canada, which is now going to be published in a book form. And so from this discussion, the association started to look at how it can become politically active in Canada. And from this discussion as well, they decided that they're going to try and expand their networks to Spain. That's why we're going to Salamanca next year to try and make new connections with associations outside of Canada, with institutions outside of Canada, to try, of course, not only support our cause, but also to make new networks. And another sort of new initiative that's coming out of this is a virtual series where hopefully members will come together to share the reaction on the report that was produced, because many embassies as well as university administrations actually want to see these numbers. So we want to see like what the impact was, and also to continue creating a space for more collaboration, to continue supporting people like me who are independent or contingent scholars. And lastly, to also talk a bit more about innovative pedagogy, because another thing that has really come to the forefront in all these discussions is indeed the need to renew the way we're teaching Spanish. But I think you can extend that to all fields, especially now with AI. Students are just learning differently from the way that they used to, and so we have to adjust our teaching practices. So in all of this, of course, my hope is that with this work, administrations at universities can be seen, that we can show them the value of our study, that why it is important. What I have really appreciated about this experience is that it's a collaboration between graduate students, contingent scholars, and professors who are currently in universities, as well as the embassies that are really wanting to, have some input here and are interested. So I suppose that that's sort of what I've been trying to do in Canada along with my community. And yeah, because in the meantime, just to give you an idea, funding is still very low in Canada for universities, and the foreign students who used to provide a lot of money to institutions, that their visas, the amount is being reduced dramatically. So the universities in Canada are currently under a lot of stress. So yeah, those are my 2 cents in my experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adriana. There's a lot There's a lot to think about and discuss, so we'll have plenty of time for discussions. But now I'd like to invite Anthony Lioi to share. So Anthony Lioi is a professor of English at the Juilliard School in New York, a former president of ASLE. He's the author of Nerd Ecology and many essays on contemporary American literature and popular culture. Last year, Anthony spoke in our Independent and Contingent Scholar Speaker Series and gave a really powerful talk about how eco-criticism originated with independent thinkers, writers, and activists, showing that this field has certainly never been siloed in tenure track positions in the past. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from Anthony now about some hope for the future.
Yay. All right. Well, that's a big lift, but I'll try. Um, so hi everybody. Thanks for being here. I just wanted to say, in order to sort of compress my comments, that my sort of evil plan for solidarity is in print form online in an essay at ASAP Journal that I think is now the link is in the chat. And also, Juilliard is having a conference on February 6th. The link to that is also in the chat. Unfortunately, we can't live stream the entire conference, but Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, like our own former president, is going to be the plenary speaker, and his speech will be available through webinar, right? So attached to that same website that's linked. So if you wanna check all that stuff out, please do. We'd love to see local ASLE people there, of course. So I just wanted to say this relates to my first point that I'm a full-time faculty member at Juilliard, but Juilliard has no tenure system. And so part of what is weird about the last year is that so many jobs are being in the US and the UK and probably elsewhere are being destroyed, right? People who have tenure, right, are being fired because their departments are being destroyed. And like this just happened, like the most recent version near me is at the new school, which is really shocking. Right, like many people have been offered severance packages in an attempt like to get down the $50 million deficit that they're working with. And that's not the only example. Like I know dozens of people who had tenure, right, and now have no job. And so for me, right, the weirdness of that is that like my institution's inertia, right, where like they can't be bothered at the moment to fire me, right, for cause, because they could fire me at any minute, but weirdly, I seem more protected at the moment than a lot of tenured people. So I'm calling this for the Stranger Things fans, our journey into the upside down, right? Because this is so counterintuitive to me, and I'm sure to many of you too, that I think we have to recognize that that context has changed, that tenure doesn't mean what it used to mean in terms of protection or a lifelong job. And conversely, like not having access to tenure apparently also doesn't mean what it used to mean, right? And I'm not gonna, like, I have no wisdom about this at the moment. I just wanted to point that out because I think that it's a problem that we need to think through in order to strategize under the new conditions. So that's point one. Point two is something that I just found out myself a couple of months ago. And I mean, this is relevant for the U.S. audience, but maybe relevant elsewhere. So the American Association of University Professors, AAUP, uh, combined, like amalgamated, I'm not quite sure what the right thing to say is, with the American Federation of Teachers in 2023. So now they are AAUP AFT, and AFT is a pretty aggressive union. And so the good news that I learned is that you don't have to have a local chapter in your school because like Juilliard will never have that chapter for a variety of structural reasons, right? But what I found out is that they have this new status of at-large membership. So individuals without local chapters in their school, like bargaining units, can join as individuals and be part of an area chapter which gives you access to all sorts of AAUP trainings and other resources, and of course, solidarity and alliances. So I thought that that was pretty important and really good news that I was happy to discover. And then finally, and I mean, there's a lot of detail to discuss here, which we can do later. And then my third point is that my department has recently hired so many new junior faculty. We're lucky to do that. That about half of us are now junior. And the whole question of what it means to have a career versus having a job, right, in the traditional academic sense, is really fraught for them because most of them went to graduate school where they already understood, right, that they might not get an academic job. And so they've investigated other opportunities and are actually like gigging at some of them at the same time. And so simultaneously, they're not as vulnerable in the sense that they have other options. They don't have to stay in academia, which I think is good news, unfortunately, right, in terms of them and their lives. But I do think that the task that my department is facing is probably a larger task for others too, which is to try to be honest with junior faculty about our understanding of the shape of the career, right? What does that mean under the current circumstances? What can people expect? How can we strategize to get them as many resources as we can? So those are the three issues that I wanted to raise, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. That was really interesting. I love all of those 3 points, and I didn't actually know that about the AFT and AAUP. So I'm excited for the discussion. But I would like to invite Kelsey now to speak. Kelsey is, or Dr. Kelsey McFaul is a postdoctoral research fellow at University College Dublin, where she specializes in postcolonial literature and the environmental humanities, with a focus on African literatures, languages, and translation. From 2023 to 2025, following her PhD, she was an independent scholar and assistant editor at Two Lines Press, a nonprofit press publishing literature in translation. She was co-chair of the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment, ASLE, conference in Maryland, and the Collective Atmospheres Conference this past July in 2025. So thank you for that. And she's currently running for the contingent independent advocacy officer seat as the executive council. So just in case you haven't cast your votes yet. So please, looking forward to hearing from you, Kelsey.
Kate, thank you, and thank you to Kate and Amy for organizing. And yes, I think especially in light of running for that seat, I mostly am wanting to listen and to learn from all of you about the kinds of direction that we want to see going forward. But as I was reflecting and preparing for this panel, I was thinking that I was, coming out of the PhD, I was one sort of contingent scholar, and now I am another sort. Kind of coming out of the PhD into a wage work job, and kind of being independent, not having a kind of institutional affiliation was one set of challenges that I think many of us will be familiar with in terms of, I think the main things are time to do research outside of 9 to 5. So you end up kind of doing it on the evenings or the weekends when you can galvanize yourself with enough energy to do that. And then the second major challenge is a lack of resources, particularly around archives, libraries, those kinds of materials. And then, of course, resources in terms of travel and conference access as well. And there's, I think, many ways that resources are impacted. I think one of the main things that was very solidifying and grounding for me in that period of my contingent life was that I was part of not so much writing groups in an organized sense, but I co-wrote with people a lot during that period, whether we were working on co-written essays together or whether we just, scheduled an hour or 2 hours on Zoom once a week or bi-monthly or something, and we're just together in the same space writing. And those meetings or that kind of structured time helped address both of those concerns, both the time question of like, will I actually make time to do the work that I want to do? And then also the question of resources. So if there were folks in those groups who were still affiliated with institutions and had library access, we could share articles with each other. And then, also all the other forms of information that gets shared amongst people when you're in graduate school or even when you're in a postdoc or a faculty position. But when you're in that independent spot, you suddenly are outside of those flows of information and opportunities. So those kinds of like writing spaces were very valuable to me at that stage and have continued on. So I'm very grateful to those folks in my life. And one of the things that I've noticed now is that they also gave me material for the next stage of now, Anthony, I'm like, I can't call it a career. The next stage of the journey. Well, I'm cautious to call it a career. So that when I came into a slightly more solid position, I wasn't staring at a blank page. I had projects that were already in progress and ongoing, and then I felt I had some momentum on, which has helped me a lot. I think, the other major change in my own life has been being an independent scholar in the United States versus now being a postdoc in Europe, and in Ireland in particular, which is quite a different climate than the United States. But a large part of the reason I'm here is because I applied widely, and this is where there was interest in the kind of work that I do. And I think that this is something that many of us are facing is that, as we've talked about, there's departments that are not hiring, that are closing altogether, a real hesitation around the topics that ASLE members study, environment, sustainability, coloniality, all of these things. And I think this is creating more and more contingency, as we've all been talking about. And so it's hard to really wrap my mind around the scale of the shifts that we're seeing, but I think they're really significant. One thing that Adriana, you mentioned, and so I will kind of follow up as well. We're having the opposite experience in Ireland, where including American students, are seeking out Irish universities even for study abroad or for just a semester at a time, because they can take classes in Black studies, they can take classes on race, they can take classes on the environment and climate change and sustainability in a way that they're not able to in other places. And I didn't know that was happening until I got here, but it's a kind of interesting dynamic to be aware of and thinking about as we go forward. But I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. That's really wonderful and interesting, and I'm excited to hear more, or maybe about this co-writing as a strategy for solidarity. I love that. So I'm really excited to also now introduce Stephen Rust. Actually, Stephen's name came up a lot in our speaker series last year as someone who has really driven eco-media studies in the environmental humanities. I'm excited to now just introduce you and hear from you. So Stephen Rust is a teaching professor in the English department at the University of Oregon. Stephen has been an active part of the growth of eco-media studies as co-editor of Eco-Cinema Theory and Practice, Eco-Media Key Issues, Eco-Cinema Theory and Practice, and the Routledge Handbook of Eco-Media Studies, and also a founding advisory board member of Journal of Environmental Media and Media and Environment. And he's also a former ASLE board member, the first contingent faculty member who was elected to that position. So a long history of doing wonderful work. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Stephen.
Hi, everybody. We're going to test the noise canceling properties of Zoom because on my campus at this time of year, there's always at the wrong time a leaf blower blowing loudly outside of everybody's rooms during classes. It is a real privilege to be here with everybody. Over the past year, as far as my teaching situation goes, at the University of Oregon, we underwent a strange process where our union threatened a strike, and we were within hours of going on strike as a union, which is a union that covers both contingent faculty and tenure track faculty. At the last hour, the university administration came together with the union and agreed to not the perfect, but not insignificant raise in pay and in benefits. And then 2 weeks later, after all the situation had been seemingly resolved for the positive, they announced the first of a series of layoffs. And so over the last year, I'm at a large university, the University of Oregon on the West Coast. We have about 16,000 students. And over the last year, I've lost 200 colleagues. The largest percentage of those colleagues are, as always, at places like this among staff members. But 40 of those folks were career faculty members. Like I am non-tenure track faculty members, librarians. And so for the first time in a while, I've been I've been a little concerned about what my own future brings, even though I was just given a promotion to what we're calling teaching professor now, which is a sort of name only recognition. So that's kind of the state we're in, right? We are in a little bit of an Orwellian situation that we created in part for ourselves, where the words that we say don't always match, and in fact often mean the opposite of the reality. In the classroom, I think like many of you, the last year has I've shifted quite a bit of my pedagogical energy to addressing AI. I was somebody who, uh, some of you ASLE members may have read at one point a Wendell Berry essay called Why I'm Not Going to Buy a Computer, written, I believe, in the early 1980s. And I felt a sort of affinity for that as AI began to roll out, and suddenly find myself realizing that this is here to stay and it's going to reshape everything that we do, especially most of my teaching is in writing. And so I've been part of that, though, comes with some new opportunities for solidarity and building new coalitions. So I have found myself being drawn to conferences and groups focusing on online pedagogies. I'm going to a conference in Rhodes, Greece, next year. That's a 2-day large international conference. And that has been exciting. I've also gotten involved in another organization called AMPS. That's AMPS, that is an interdisciplinary organization that brings together architects, media scholars, and political science and sociology professors. Very eclectic kind of interdisciplinary blend, but I'm already seeing the seeds of eco-critical interest grow among that group. And so it's fun to kind of be somebody at this point in my career who can bring some expertise and interest in those background areas to a new group of people, right? That was something I've always benefited from ASLE is it often feels like a home base, kind of safe space, if you might call it, to be invested in ASLE and then to branch those roots out into the areas of our lives and our colleagues that are surprisingly maybe still unaware of what we do, or sort of like beginning to understand the value. As far as environmental issues go, the the last year, I think people are continuing to be unimpressed by what the federal government in the United States is doing. I have colleagues and family members who work in government who've lost jobs from important places like fisheries, wildlife over the last year. And while budget cuts are often a necessity uh, when budgets become bloated, this is beyond that. And so I think there are some opportunities that are going to open up for us to continue to build our networks beyond education, to be connecting with folks who've maybe lost their jobs or trying to rebuild those other areas of government and nonprofits in some exciting ways. For me, movies is a great way to connect people and always has been and will continue to be as well. Um, in terms of activism, I'm one of those people who's maybe, unlike some of you, a little more hesitant to be politically active. I often see the role of education as being a little bit like a journalist, where it's our role to be in the middle and listen to both sides and help students from both sides of the coin navigate those kind of things. Um, so that's just my own personal take. However, I am finding myself devoting extra time and energy to helping certain student groups and individuals navigate ICE issues in places where we didn't think ICE was ever going to target people, like right outside of university buildings. At Oregon State University up the road, the ICE folks have been sort of camping out in the neighborhoods around campus and are beginning to really threaten the kind of useful divide that we often have between politics of the day and the long-term traditions and safety of a university. Um, and then finally, just briefly, my own research. This is one of those, I find myself as a contingent faculty member needing to take time for myself. I often feel like I've have these periods of my career where I'm really invested in coalition building, working on large book projects, and then I need a year or two to just do something for me. Um, and so the last year I've reconnected with my long-term writing partner, Salman Lonani, who I can't say enough about how important it is to have a friend um, who believes in you to help you get through hard times, and have returned to doing some writing in ways that I'd almost given up on, and have found some renewed energy to do projects that are just for me at this point in my career. So I think I'm over 6 minutes now, so I'm going to stop there, but I'm looking forward to where our conversation takes us.
No, thank you so much, Stephen. That was there's a lot to talk about there. It's like writing a lot of things down, so I'm excited. I'm excited for the conversation. So, I would first like to invite Mimi to also speak. So finally, we'll hear from Mimi Winick, who actually gave a presentation last year during our speaker series about grant acquisition off the tenure clock, and gave a lot of really wonderful resources. So I'm curious to hear also an update. But to introduce Mimi, Mimi Winick is a Paul Edwards Chair in Religion and the Arts at Virginia Commonwealth University. Her current book project on late Victorian theorists and religion, theorists of religion, and their invention of a secret history of feminist spirituality was supported by a 2023 ACLS project development grant. From 2016 to 2024, Mimi worked off the tenure track at 3 different universities, including as a fellow in the Women's Studies in Religion program and on the Transcendence and Transformation Initiative at the Center for the Study of World Religions at Harvard Divinity School. So welcome, Mimi. Welcome back. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Amy. I'm really honored to be back, and I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. And I'm learning a lot too, and feel very much in conversation with this group. I did want to share a couple thoughts. One is to pick up on a theme that has emerged, and you kind of asked us to reflect on what has changed about our sense of the landscape for contingent scholars and scholars broadly in the last year, considering the sort of ferment the whole world is in, and especially academia and the research world. And I was sort of trying to think about that, especially with my remit in the funding area. But one thing I wanted to pick up on first was just kind of like what Anthony was saying. Everyone's contingent now. And that's been true for a very long time, but more people recognize it. And I think that that is changing how people relate to each other in really valuable ways. So I just want to acknowledge that shift in the like quality of the world around us. And one thing I've seen is a conference I went to recently has made a point of when they put make name tags for the attendees, they don't put the institution. You just get your name, and then you also get like a fun little thing that connects you with other members of a small group for little breakout sessions. And the organizer said specifically, like, we didn't want that middle school dance thing where you're kind of like looking at other people's names tags and like vetting their prestige, where someone's always looking past you to a better partner or something. And I thought, people are thinking like that now. Conference organizers are thinking like that now. And I just think that that is a testament to perhaps a maturation of our industry in difficult times. And maybe the sense too that there's so many of us who have our contingent have a lot of experience as contingent scholars, and know how it can feel to feel like you're treated as second class, but to know you're not. Um, and another thought that came up, I went to the Modernist Studies Association conference in Boston in the fall. And I went to the Independent and Contingent Scholars sort of special interest group caucus meeting, and they have a really robust, wonderful organization there. If any of you also sort of have field overlap with modernist studies, led by Kate Schnur and Nissa Ray Cannon, excellent scholars and excellent advocates. And the contingent scholar and modernist scholar Sean Weidman spoke there about what he called a sort of specific contingent expertise, the expertise that you gain as a contingent scholar, the perspective you gain that's different from someone who perhaps has a more traditionally recognized stable job. And that really resonated with me. And that's something that I just found that that sort of positive take on it really valuable. And I think so one element of contingent expertise that I feel like I see around me is this sort of putting the value on solidarity and knowing how to form those connections, whether it's the writing group, the co-writing. These are such crucial, that's something that's been essential to my like continued research, my grant applications, like all that stuff goes through my writing group, and its accountability and its feedback. And my writing group, my primary one has been going since like 2017, I think. And we've all been through like permutations of like different contingent jobs, different tenure track jobs. We've seen two people through tenure now, one person through founding a union. Like it's been amazing. So like you can, and like none of us, I think, knew when we started this writing group that those things were in our future. And it's been, two books and countless articles too, and hopefully a third book if I get a contract soon. So another thing I wanted to say sort of on the funding side. So two things I've learned about funding in the past year. So I still stand by everything I said in my previous last year's presentation. So I do recommend if you want to hear more about funding, go back to that. I won't try to rehash that here. But one thing I learned is that even as so much federal government money has been slashed and put in wild new uses, there's still a lot of private money out there funding research fellowships and things. And one way to find out more about that is if you are a contingent scholar at an institution, especially a larger institution, you'll often have these offices of sponsored programs OSP, or offices of sponsored research, or something. Sometimes you also have something called foundations, which is an office that's specifically about when like people at the university apply to private foundations for money. And that can be for sort of like more administrative-y things. But some colleagues and I just put in a sort of foundations rooted grant to Interfaith America for like a campus health grant. And one of the things we did with that is it was mostly tenure track folks on the project team writing the grant and putting it through. But one of the things we put in our budget was specific money for our non-tenure track colleagues. So in some cases, that was adjunct colleagues, getting them money for team teaching classes, something our adjuncts often can't do. Or sometimes it was folks working part-time, getting sort of like course buyouts so they could do other projects. And so there's nifty other opportunities out there. And one of the ways we were able to do this was through networking. And so um, when you're now I'm on the tenure track, and so but I make a point of like my networking is with everyone at my university because I know from not having been on the tenure track so long, we all have a lot to contribute. And so depending on where you are, like it's important to use your own institutional power to sort of keep those lines open for other people, as well as when you are contingent to like reach out to those people who might have the sort of time paid for in their contracts to write grants and like make sure they know, hey, I'm doing this cool thing. It seems to be connected to what you're doing. Love to have coffee sometime. Or even like, hey, I heard about this grant. Have you thought about looking into this? I would love to be a part of a team. You can push those things up and then get yourself written into a budget. I've now been a part of that process and it's been really nice. So there's all sorts of sort of outcomes to solidarity. And then I think the another sort of thing on that front is, and I said this a little bit last year, but just like through so many years of applying and reapplying and reapplying for grants, realizing the importance of the human connections. So like between you, like the people reading your grant application on the other side are humans too. And I benefited so much from talking to program officers in preparing for my talk last year. And I couldn't believe I never did it when I was applying for grants. So for the love of God, reach out to program officers. I did it this year for this Interfaith America grant, and it was super helpful. And I'm sure it helped us write a better grant. And I'm sure it would have helped me on my individual grants too. So, like, if you need a nudge, let me be the nudge. Like, just send the email. They're humans. They want to hear from you. Some of them even hold like grant office hours for applicants if you ask, but you just have to ask. Hopefully, they'll make this stuff more transparent, but I'm here to tell you at least ask. And so some of this is in my talk from last year too. And then, I guess another thing about that would maybe be I kind of forgot to set my timer and I meant to. So I'm going to conclude shortly. But basically that, right. So foundations, private money is out there. And Oh, internal funding still exists too, but again, sometimes it's not communicated well to those off the tenure track. So this was something I did realize now in my first tenure track job. All of a sudden, I got invited to meetings with like deans of research and stuff that I worked off the tenure track at the same university before, so I know that I didn't even know about these meetings before. So I'm here to tell you that like yes, the structural support is so different and real. So like you're not imagining that, you're not paranoid. But like those resources still are there. And even if you're not on the tenure track and not invited to these meetings, you can still reach out to these human beings and say, hey, I would love to pick your brain about. And then some universities will often have like somebody in these program offices of external funding or sponsored research, whatever it is, who like specifically reads grants and offers feedback. And I did use those when I was off the tenure track and found it really, really helpful. Sometimes you have to be a little pushy, but that's maybe coming out of like contingent expertise can give us that pushiness, or maybe your writing group can help nudge you on, or like just me right now, like be pushy because they should be inviting you to these meetings and it sucks that they're not. So get yourself to them on your own. which like it's hard when you don't have the time, but the resources are there. We should all be taking advantage of them, and I want you to know about them. So maybe that's where I'll end, which is just like everyone is contingent. But those of us who have had longer experiences of being contingent have already built up our contingent expertise, and we should be proud of that and use that and share that with each other. And I'm happy to talk more in the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mimi. I absolutely love that idea of contingent expertise because it's so real and valuable. So I would like to, if anyone from the audience has a question, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, we can also have you unmute. But I'd like to first just invite the speakers, if any of you would like to respond to each other. I'd like to invite you to do that. And otherwise, I have a few questions. And yeah, and hopefully, folks from the audience will have a question. Thank you all for coming to listen to us and be part of this conversation. So, yeah.
We have a question for Anthony, because I'm struck like with you teaching at Juilliard. I also, because of the work I do in religion and the arts, work with a lot of artists. And I think I've
Uh-huh.
learned a lot from people working in the art world about like sort of how to take advantage of institutions in a sort of like Fred Moten, Stefano Harney Undercommons way, and just like what it means to keep doing your work without adequate support. And I was wondering if from your experience too at Juilliard and in New York, if you had anything more to say about that.
I mean that I have a lot more to say about that, but it's hard to summarize it all at once, in part because we have three divisions, dance, drama, and music, and like each of them is their own world. And I actually think that one of the things that I've learned from that situation is that our current president, who professionally was a dancer, came into his presidency with the explicit goal of like actually having everyone collaborate during coursework, which had not been the case. Like everybody was very deeply siloed. And like you could spend an entire 4 years as an undergraduate in one division, never really meeting students from the other divisions. And so he's tried to create structures of collaboration. And I guess the first thing that I have to say about that is that like we liberal arts, which is my department, we are trying to sort of connect to those new structures because they're new and to suggest that like we can also be peer collaborators, right? Because to be completely honest, many performing artists and conservatory cultures are just like you're an alien from space, right? Like why would anybody study what you study? Why should I study it? Right? And so like we have that internal block already, but we're trying to use these like the institution is in a moment of building new connections between each other, and so we're trying to like catch on and go like, yes, we want to collaborate for real, not as Oompa Loompas, right? But actually, as people who are going to survive the chocolate factory. So I have a lot to say about that we could talk about together if you wanted. I'd love to do that. But I also want to say I'm so inspired by what everyone has said, and because in my role as journal editor for Regeneration Journal, which used to be Resilience but is now Regeneration, I would love if people wanted to write reflections or short essays or long articles or do a special issue on contingency, right, in the environmental humanities, like that would be great, either as groups or individuals. So I invite everybody who's listening to think about that and then let me know.
Yeah, I love that idea. That sounds really cool and really important right now. One
Let's do
thing
it.
that struck me from all the talks tonight, and I'm really inspired by everyone's, is actually the this networking, like from sort of writing groups that have been going on that you'd see each other through, to what Stephen was talking about with these interdisciplinary networks, where suddenly the environmental humanities can have a place. Uh, but I'm also curious because this has been something that has definitely come up for me, as when I was teaching high school, but also now in moments of precarity, we have quite, I think, an international panel and international audience. So we're facing different challenges in the Netherlands than in the US. But I think one thing that we're always kind of thinking about, and especially now with AI and the environmental impacts of AI, is sort of just like, what should our priorities in the environmental humanities be, particularly around teaching or research? Where should we be publishing? How do you sort of navigate those sort of boundaries between, I guess, not so much activism. I really appreciated what you said, Stephen, about supporting students and navigating complex issues. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on what the priorities should be at the moment, and maybe what strategies we could use for working towards those. So, yeah. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yeah, okay, yes. Zoom does that now with the hand. Anyway, well, one thing that I also think we have to continue working on is just being visible, because one thing that I noticed is that as I was teaching just now in my Spanish courses, and eventually at the end, you get to know your students, so they begin to ask you questions. And students, when I told them what my doctoral thesis was about, which is, about and I'd explained to them that what eco-criticism is, they're like, oh, wow, we've never thought about that. How interesting. And like, you really see that spark. And so I think visibility is just so key. And as instructors, we have sort of this kind of special spot where we can, especially so in mine, since I'm teaching Spanish, I get students from the whole university through my classes, people who are doing engineering, who are doing biomedicine, business, whatever. And so this is like their one little touch of humanities, is they're taking Spanish with me. And so then we talk about these issues, and you can just see a world opening up for them. And so I would say just continuing to talk about what you're doing with your students, if you have the chance to do so, is just really great. One other thing I want to say about activism, for me, it's actually for survival, because in the Canadian context right now, the way as it stands, if I don't speak up for my program and what we do, we're just going to disappear. Like my whole program at University of Ottawa, they're not hiring anyone new in the Spanish program at all. And so we might become a glorified language school if we don't do anything else. And it's a shame, because it's the capital of Canada and there are no graduate programs in Spanish. English is struggling as well. And so, yeah, that's my activism. It doesn't have to even do so much with like a specific gender studies or multiculturalism or any, like, it's just advocating for the importance of people having access to being able to study Spanish. So yeah, just I guess framing it in the Canadian context. So
No, really powerful to that. Yeah. Would other speakers like to? Oh, yeah. Yes, but I don't your name, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Okay. I don't know how my name got up on the screen, RHLUT. My name is Ralph Lutz, Ralph H. Lutz. And
Welcome.
I really appreciate this group discussion of solidarity. And I think it's solidarity both in terms of solidarity among scholars and scholarship, and solidarity among teachers who are working with college students. But there's another piece that's sort of not there, and it's about related to my life circumstances. I'm a retired scholar. I'm a retired uh, college professor at Virginia Tech, Hampshire College, Goddard College, and I'm retired. So thanks, God, thank Social Security and Medicare, because I've got some economic support there. uh, and I've found that very interesting. But there are also scholars in museums. And I've been a manager in the Museum of Science in Boston, a manager of the Virginia Museum of Natural History, uh, and also had leadership roles in a number of environmental education organizations. Uh, but for someone like me who is not employed by the kind of organizations that you've been speaking of, I sure would be delighted to be young and teaching in a college, uh, but that's not the case right now. There, and I'd like to find ways in which retired college faculty are able to find connections with universities. And after I retired and I was living in Virginia, uh, I was a visiting scholar at Virginia Tech. Uh, and there was compensation associated with that. And I'm now in Maryland and been working to establish a relationship with the University of Salisbury in Maryland. And so this gives me the delightful experience of being back in academia in association with people who I work with. There is a organization, a national coalition of independent scholars, and that would include people who have never taught in a university. But it also provides support and resources for those who are not aligned with universities. The National Coalition of Independent Scholars, and I recently became a member but have not been really engaged with them. They
Well, that's be
offer
great. If you don't
grants.
mind putting those some of the links in the chat would be really wonderful as well. So
Yeah,
we can access them as well.
yeah, and they provide support. They also have their own journal, so it's something I've looked forward to engaging with. They also have annual conferences. So there can be a larger community of scholars than that is associated with universities.
Yeah, for
There's a
sure. I think that's the one of the things about independent contingent scholars. It's such a diverse group of people that are really coming from.
yes.
Yeah, just I mean, I remember just being a high school teacher and trying to do research in the weekends.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a completely different frame of mind. I'm curious
Yes.
if any of the speakers want to respond or have a uh, just so because I know we're almost at time, so I just want to make sure that everyone has time to say and share. But thank you so much, Ralph. I really appreciate. Yeah, this is. I think it's a really important thing to consider. Also, retired independent faculty as well. Yeah, and
Hmm.
museum and other scholars. Yeah. Any final thoughts or impressions, responses from the speakers maybe first, and if there's any question left.
Kate, I'll just be very brief, but I think Kate, you had asked about like priorities, and I don't know if this is my pitch for a priority, but others could disagree with me. But I think in the context, like interacting with students, there's such a concern around, or like expressions of climate anxiety are something that we're hearing more and more, this kind of awareness of the climate is changing. There are things that are outside of my control. There's nothing I can do about it. So these kinds of things come up in a literature classroom, but in other places. And I think we're particularly well suited to have those conversations with students and even to connect them to some of these AI questions too, because these are, the consequences of your actions on on ChatGPT are directly related to climate impacts. And I think making those links for students is really important. I know we're out of time. I also wanted to ask Anthony a follow-up question about this, the ways that you are kind of asking in junior scholars to like think about their contingency and their expertise as, or as being kind of both and one foot in both worlds. Like, how are you counseling people in those ways? I'd be very curious to know, especially around some of this like kind of thinking about contingency expertise. I don't know if we have time for that question, but
Should I say something short or no?
Yeah.
Okay. I would actually say it's the reverse. They're teaching me, right, what else we can do because they figured out things that I had not figured out. And speaking of museums, I have a historian junior colleague who has worked, right, as a docent in a museum, right, and is still affiliated with that museum in Manhattan and is also doing tutoring on his own, right? And so there's a sense of that's just one example for the sake of time, right, where they have like the junior scholars that we have now are not putting all of their eggs in the basket of academia, right, of formal professor positions because they can't, right? But they are turning up all of these options that they're sort of putting together, right, in a mosaic to make sure that they actually are not going to bottom out financially if one of those pieces gets lost, right? So I mean, my current project is actually trying to explain that to the provost, who doesn't really understand that. So he's a violist, right? So so he doesn't understand like why a professor who's an academic would need to do that. But anyway, work in progress.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anthony. Yes, we are over time. So if anyone has to go, you can, of course, go. But I would just like to thank our panelists and also thank you for all for coming and sharing your expertise as well.